Well, new GM, new coach, new quarterback, new most of the roster, semi-new owner, kind of new everything in our nation's capital. Fun team to talk about. Lots to go over today. New schemes, new personnel. I mean, it's a brand new organization.
It was about time, and I am extremely happy for Washington fans. I spent a little time right outside of Washington, D.C. growing up. The team at that time was a completely different institution. They went through a long period of drought, which we are not going to talk about a lot today. We are going to talk about all the new stuff, and the new stuff is exciting.
Tons to go over, so hopefully you stick with us through the next hour-ish, maybe a little bit more because of how much turnover there's been. Again, a lot of Commanders talk coming your way. So, Jay, roll the intro. Welcome back once again to the Bootleg Football Podcast. I'm Brett Coleman. That's EJ Snyder. We're talking Commanders today in episode 5 of our 32-episode team-by-team summer preview series with a little hint of 2023 recap to kind of set the stage for everything that's happened in the last 4 to 5-ish months. Beautiful day out here in Washington State, the other Washington. Probably move outside later today when the wind calms down to record some more episodes out there on the deck. But for now, keeping it inside.
Yeah, we have nature's metaphor, right? We had a big storm last night, and now it's past, and we have a beautiful day. And it's the same thing as the Commanders. There was a long storm in this organization.
Good analogy. There we go, EJ.
So, Commanders, 2023, still when it was stormy. 4-13, fourth in the division, 1-7 at home, 3-6 on the road, and 0-5 in the last 5 games. So,
is that good?
Yeah. If ever an organization needed sweeping change, top to bottom, this was the one. We've got a couple of measures for you on top of those. This year, we're introducing QBS, which stands for quarterback support. If you want to know more about how that's developed, you can check the link down in the description. It'll describe all the metrics, but basically, it's a measure of how much support an organization gives a quarterback to win. That includes offensive measures, defensive measures, special teams. It's rolled together into a 0 to 100 score. The Commanders were a 9.7.
Not great, Bob.
Not great, Bob.
And keep in mind that factors in things like pass blocking efficiency, non-quarterback rushing EPA, openness of receivers, which is kind of like a way of quantifying scheme of like how often are guys open when they catch the ball. A lot of numbers go into it. We did a whole, not me, it's EJ's stat. He and Arjun did a whole live stream kind of breaking down all the elements, all the nitty gritty of like how this number came to be. It's fascinating stuff. Very scientific, way over my head. I'm way too dumb to get it. But it's a damn good stat, and the Commanders are really, really shit in it. At least were.
9.7 gave them a 29th out of 32 teams rating. Not great, Bob. The measure that we introduced you to last year in this series, Power Score, is a little bit simpler to derive. We simply take their ranks in 6 categories: rushing offense, passing offense, rush defense, pass defense, points scored, and points allowed. And we simply assign them their league rank. 1 out of 32, where were they? We add those up, divide by 6, we get a power score. Commanders' power score, lower is better in power score. You want to be number 1, 26, which is 31st overall. So we still have a mystery team out there that did worse overall, but when you look at the combination of these two statistics, a 31st ranking in power score, a 29th ranking in QBS, it paints the picture of really what we saw on the field. So, if anything, they underperformed slightly, but they just didn't really perform in any category across the board.
And I know there are some Commanders fans out there that will say, well, yeah, but we had a midseason fire sale. They kind of gave up. They decided, I don't want to say tank, but they decided that they were not going to compete in the NFC, so they were going to go the other direction. They were going to trade their 2 edge rushers away. By the way, thank you for Montez Sweat in Chicago. I think he actually led both teams in sacks this year.
He did. First time it's ever happened for a player that one player led 2 teams in sacks in the same year.
That is wild, absolutely wild. But they kind of they figured out midseason like, hey, this ain't gonna work. Let's blow this thing up, and that led to them somehow being even worse down the stretch because that was kind of the goal. But it worked out. They got the number 2 pick. They got Jaden Daniels. They crushed the draft. We'll get to the draft in a little bit, but in 2023. The results were not pretty. 32nd ranked rush defense in terms of EPA, 32nd in points allowed, 32nd in points differential. The offense wasn't the worst in the league, but they weren't good. But the defense was just straight up awful. And that's why they hired Dan Quinn. Try to fix that.
Yeah, if you look at the offense, a shout out to folks that fought valiantly, but eventually didn't win the fight. If you're talking about the QBS being 29th out of 32 teams, in terms of points scored, they were 25th. So again, they did a little bit better. They made some plays that were sort of left on the table, but it was nowhere near enough. And when you're allowing the most points in the entire league, you're not going to win a lot of football games.
Well, let's talk about the new schemes that have come in to try to fix all of that shit.
To fix gestures and everything, all of that.
Bluntly, right? Because we do have 2 new coordinators, again, when there's sweeping changes in the organization. We'll kind of get into the front office and the head coaching in a little bit. But, we got 2 new coordinators, 2 new systems that are coming in. Cliff on offense, and then Dan Quinn, I presume it's going to be his defensive identity there in Washington. So we'll start with Cliff's offense and what this means now that we're turning the page to 2024. So you had to go back to 2022 to look at the Cardinals, the last time that Cliff had the keys to an NFL offense. And I want to choose my words carefully here. It was very college-ish, but I don't mean that in a bad way. Right. It's just interesting. It's just interesting to me to look at this Cliff offense, especially when we're trying to project its fit for Jaden Daniels, right? So here are some of the hallmarks of what Commanders fans are going to see. In 2022, the Cardinals were almost exclusively a shotgun offense, which shouldn't surprise anybody. Their run schemes were, in terms of the family of calls that they stuck to, it wasn't super diverse. A lot of inside zone, a lot of counter, some duo. But how they ran those runs, the diversity came within the inside zone family, within the counter family. They ran those 2 concepts in every possible way you could think of because they had a huge variety of formations and personnel groupings that they ran those concepts out of. Ton of 12 personnel. They were, I think, 8th in 12 personnel in 2022. So they love to get multiple tight ends on the field, which is a preview of our Ben Sinnott talk in a little bit. EJ and I both absolutely adore that pick, and he's perfect for Cliff's offense. Very trips heavy, even when they had 12 personnel on the field. Very trips heavy, very 3x1 heavy. They ran 3x1 more than any other team in Arizona in 2022. They were very much here's our one isolated receiver, and then here's 3 guys that we're going to arrange in a variety of ways. They didn't lead the NFL in any particular type of 3x1, but they led an overall 3x1. So again, huge variety within that 3x1 family. So sometimes the tight ends were attached, sometimes they weren't. Sometimes the tight ends were split all the way out wide. They did it in a whole bunch of different ways. So again, there wasn't a ton of different 2x2 looks, but there was a huge variety of 3x1 looks. Very low motion rate, which was kind of one of the criticisms of Cliff's offense in 2022, is they didn't use a lot of motion. They kind of kept it more as a static picture so that Kyler could read it, understand what he was going to get, and then everything kind of executes post snap in that air raid style offense because there's a lot of route adjustments based on it. So if you're using motion, it changes the picture, and then that can kind of cloud the adjustments that receivers are supposed to make, which is why they stayed away from motion, but he got criticized a lot for that. Very high screen rate, called the most screens in the NFL in 2022. Had 108 total, that's a lot of screens.
That's a lot.
Ton of screens. So you can expect to see that quite a bit.
Yep.
Didn't work the intermediate to deep middle of the field that much, which again, I'm okay with because Jaden Daniels didn't do that a whole lot at LSU anyway. Not saying he can't do it. I'm just saying he didn't do it because of the structure of the LSU offense. So adding all these things together, it makes sense why they were zeroed in on Jayden, when you're running this type of offense, because it's not that dissimilar to what he did at LSU, and we already know he's really good at it. So why try to mess this whole thing up? Like, let's just take the guy that fits the offense. Like, I understand the process here, right?
And the fit is not bad. You talked about a lot of things that Cliff likes to do. Now, the base look was different, but for the Cardinals, that base look was 3x1, and we're going to run everything on that other side out of the trip set. We're going to get them into some very familiar things in some very interesting ways. And that's going to be fascinating given the personnel that we talk about in a bit in terms of how they get arranged, how they get used. A lot of the stuff will look similar pre-snap and very different post-snap.
On the defensive side of the ball, looking at Dan Quinn's defense, it wasn't super exotic in Dallas. I don't expect them to be super exotic in Washington, regardless of who's actually doing the defensive play calling, which I don't think I've actually gotten clarification yet on. And Commanders fans can sound off in the comments. Like, I don't know if Dan's calling it or not. He might be. I truly don't know. But I have to assume it's going to be his defense, whether or not he's the one calling it on a play-to-play basis. But if you're looking at what they did in Dallas, 61% of their snaps were single high structures, meaning either cover 1 or cover 3. They ran more cover 1 than all but 2 teams last year. Like, ton of man coverage, ton of cover 3. That was what they were. Not a super high blitz rate, because when you had their pass rush, you didn't really need to blitz all that often. If you can get there with 4, you get there with 4. Very high stunt rate on third down, because again, if you're rushing with 4, you still need to find a way to create seams when you have 4 against 5. So that's why typically teams that specialize in 4-man rushes call a lot of stunts. They're no different. The exoticness that you got from Dallas was really just, where's Micah? Because they would move him all over the place, but not a whole lot of blitzes, not a whole lot of coverage variety. Just line up and play ball, and it worked because they were really talented. You get to Washington, things are a little different, right? Like, there's some young DBs that we really like. There's some young DBs that had some struggles, like huge struggles last year. We like their interior rush, but their edge rush has some unanswered questions. Like, it's a very different tool set that they're working with here. So I'm very curious to see if the blitz rate goes up. I'm curious to see if the man coverage rate goes down, because you don't want Emmanuel Forbes out there and press man coverage all day like, Bland and Gilmore were. I think if Forbes is going to succeed in anything, honestly, it's probably a lot of cover 3, playing from the top down, using his explosiveness and everything like that. But like we saw what happened when he tried to go press man against A.J. Brown. That's not his thing. So I don't know if Dan Quinn's going to make him do that like the previous staff kept trying to make him do, even when it didn't work. So all that to say, there could be some fairly significant changes to this defense just based on the personnel that they have available. But I trust Dan Quinn to make those adjustments because he's done it before.
Puts a lot of focus on certain positions, and you're talking about single high structures, and that always puts a lot on the plate of your deep third safety. And in this defense right now, penciled in, that's Derek Forrest. Now, we like Derek Forrest when he was coming out of Cincinnati, but I didn't think of him as a sort of true deep third patroller who was elite in that category. I thought him as a more versatile two high safety in terms of structure. And again, he was drafted by a previous regime, but they brought in Jeremy Chin, and he's going to play sort of strong safety dimebacker. He's not, again, the guy you want in deep third coverage. So it's going to put a lot of pressure, a lot of emphasis on Derek Forrest. We're going to know a lot more about how good he is in that deep third quickly because teams are going to put a lot of stress on him because of those structures. He's a young player. I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm saying put some eyes on Derek Forrest early in the season to see how he responds, because they're going to put a lot on his plate. There's going to be high pressure, and the consequences are going to be high if he misses. That's the deal when you're a single high deep third safety. If you miss, you're the last one. Again, physically really gifted, super fast, good size. But we're gonna see again, a simplified game plan, but a high consequence game plan. And there's going to be a lot, and he's either going to sink or swim pretty quickly. And if not, they're going to rotate through some other options and see how that works, because you can't run a lot of those structures and not have that position work.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
If Dan is watching this ever. Quan Martin, free safety. Sainer still at nickel. Like, I mean, that's a fit to me. And then you can figure out how to use Forrest, but like, I feel like Quan Martin was born to be that. Could he be a nickel? Yes. Could he be a free safety? Yes. Like, I think he's born to be that kind of guy.
Yeah.
I think he has the range. I think he's the ball skills. He's the hips. He's the feet. I wouldn't be surprised if this is one of those, like, we'll figure it out in camp type things.
And I think that for the pass rush, too, it's really interesting to bring that up, because we talked about all the guys they let go, the big names, the edge rushers. Everybody they brought in, they bring in Dorrance Armstrong, his familiarity with Quinn from Dallas. They bring in Dante Fowler, Efe Obada. They're gonna again trying to get some of that production in aggregate, and they're going to try and, again, find their best four. We always talk about the best five for the offensive line. They're going to try and find their best four up front on defense in camp and go, okay, within this system, either because this guy knows the system or because he's really taken to it, these are going to be the guys that we start off with, but we're going to see a lot of rotation there. We're not going to see sort of the workhorse, I don't think, of like, oh, that guy's playing 80% of our snaps. We're going to see guys with 30%, 40% splits, because they're going to be running them through, keeping them fresh. And they don't really have the guy in that role right now. So camp's going to be really important, figuring out like who takes to this really quickly. Obviously, I'd give a nod, and they already have, to Dorrance Armstrong as a sort of presumptive early starter. But we'll see down the stretch when people start having answers for that. Hey, maybe a young guy steps up.
Well, let's get into the overall coaching staff and front office. There's a lot of new names here, pretty much entirely all new names.
Almost top to bottom,
So
yep.
This section's going to be longer than a lot of teams that we talk about in this series, but it's necessary because there's a bunch of new people here.
Yeah, we won't belabor Dan Quinn. He is heading into year one as the head guy in Washington. Certainly not his first go-around in the NFL, either as a head guy or just in general, a very experienced coach. But the GM I want to talk about, Adam Peters. So Adam Peters is the new GM of Washington, is really interesting as a figure in the NFL. Comes from a very successful front office in San Francisco. We're deeply impressed with his first draft. The amount of roster turnover, now a very common statistic in the NFL, is about 60 plus, 62, 65% of an NFL roster turns over within the first 18 months of a new GM. That's typical for all teams across the league. We have that amount of turnover in like 2 months with Adam Peters in charge of the Commanders. And
yeah, wasting no time.
Not at all. Came in and said, things need to change, and I'm going to change a lot of them right now. Fascinating figure. We'll talk about how much we like the draft and how much movement there's been overall, but it's going to be very interesting to watch his tenure, because there's already a lot to go on, which usually this short of a ways into a GM's tenure, we're still saying, oh, well, after a couple drafts, we'll get an idea of how he wants to operate. I think we have a pretty good idea of how Adam Peters wants to operate, and it's right now, let's go. We've got to make changes, so I'm just going to do it. And that will slow down a little bit throughout his tenure, but it feels like he's going to be aggressive in that category, and he certainly needs to be. And I think that's a refreshing change for Washington, because they've been a bit slower in the front office in terms of turnover, and he has a completely different approach. So fascinating figure as a new GM. Coordinators, we talked about Cliff. I think, again, a very well-known name in the NFL. We won't talk a lot about him. Defensive coordinators listed as Joe Witt Jr. Again, a guy with a lot of experience around the league, calling defenses, interim head coach for a bit.
I think he was.
Right? For a few games. So very experienced figure, but the balance between him and Quinn in terms of who really has the reins on game day in terms of defensive play calling, I think is yet to be established. And then a very familiar name, Larry Izzo, the Pats special teams legend, is the special teams coordinator for this team. I have to think they're going to play in a very certain style, which is the same style that Larry played, which was all out. They're going to go full speed on special teams in Washington. Notable coaches on offense and defense, really too many to hit specifically. We were trying to do 4 to 6 and highlight, but there's so many names. just going to go rapid fire even without their titles. On offense, you've got Brian Johnson. The reason we bring him up is because he is listed as the assistant head coach, which is one of those titles that gets thrown around to keep people or attract people to new jobs. But Anthony Lynn, Bobby Ingram, Andre Coleman, David Blau on offense. On defensive special teams, Ryan Kerrigan, Ken Norton Jr., John Pagano, yeah, that's Chuck's brother, Darnell Stapleton, Jason Simmons, Sharif Floyd, William Gay, Daryl Tapp, Tommy Donatel. Lots of NFL names in there, and really heavy on the Steeler influence.
And heavy on just former players.
Former players in general, but there's 4 former Steelers here. Andre Coleman, Darnell Stapleton, Jason Simmons, and William Gay all spent time with Pittsburgh. So strong connection there to this coaching staff. But again, a ton of NFL experience, both on the player side, the coaching side. Some coaching lineage names in there. Tommy Donatel, yes, is related to Ed Donatel. John Pagano is related to Chuck Pagano. David Blough, yeah, you heard me say that. He's the former Detroit backup quarterback. He's coaching on the offensive side for them. So fascinating staff, really pulling from influences all over. Ton of diversity, not just, again, from the same tree or the same team or even the same style, either on offense or defense. They've really sort of mixed and stirred, and Dan Quinn seems to have cast a very wide net here, again, with all his connections and all his experience in the league, and drawn a very interesting staff. There will be some sorting on the staff side, just like there is on the player side. We'll see some of these people be one and done and move on. We'll see some of these people move up. But, just the sort of initial casting call was like, hey, there's no salary cap on coaches. We're gonna grab everybody from all over and try and really get this thing hot wired and run down the road very quickly.
And I really do think that this coaching staff is going to be great at connecting with the players. And there's a lot of new names here, and we'll go over all of them, but it's sometimes it could be hard if you're completely remaking a roster like this. It can be hard to get everybody to gel, not just with each other, but also with the coaching staff. But when you have a coaching staff that is literally majority made up of former players, and not just like old former players, but recent former players, like Ryan Kerrigan, is not. He hasn't been out of the game that long. Like Sharif Floyd, like his career ended early because of injuries, but he's drafted 10 years ago. Like it wasn't that long ago, right?
Yep.
Daryl Tapp, Willie Gay,
Bobby Ingram.
Like there's a lot of players on this staff that, and I think ultimately that's going to help them kind of connect to all the new names that are there, and just kind of create better vibes in the room than maybe have been there in Washington in years past.
Yeah.
It's a really good strategy, I would say, from Dan Quinn to load this staff with former players and kind of help that gelling process. Like that's part of the reason why I kind of think this is going to work, is because that dynamic really is important. Like it's absolutely a factor.
And they're going to need it. There's a lot of new, again, top to bottom players, coaches, GMs, front office. This is a as clean of sweep as we've seen in the NFL in quite some time. And they're going to need it if they're going to hit the ground running, which is very important. Can't get behind the 8 ball in an NFL season. They're going to need it to work and work quickly, so they're going to need a lot of voices and a lot of connection as fast as they can get it.
So given all that information, everything that we've talked about with schematic changes and personnel changes and everything, that brings us to our Underdog Top 3. And by the way, thank you to Underdog for sponsoring this entire series, making it possible in the first place, funding us to do this series from out here on the water in the South Puget Sound. It's been a great week so far, and we could not have done this without them. But if you're playing on Underdog, or you're just a big fantasy football player in general, that's what this segment is for, is to try to identify value for every single team. So if you're going to take a Washington Commanders player in this very new look offense, who should you prioritize? Some teams don't really have a lot of values available because everything's already kind of priced in. You look at the Jets, they have like two guys that are top 12 picks. The Commanders, everybody's value is extremely suppressed right now because nobody really knows what to expect. But that's what this show is for, is we can parse through the data, we can parse through our notes on all these guys when they were coming out in the draft, and we could try to project what we think is going to happen to identify those values. Now, what those values are, Terry McLaurin, he's at wide receiver 32 right now on Underdog. Jaden Daniels, he's at QB 13 right now on Underdog. Austin Eckler, this is the big one.
Yep.
Running back 33 right now on Underdog. So these are the three guys that, and I'm not going to speak for you, but these are the three guys that I think are incredibly undervalued for where I think they could finish by the end of the year. I'm not saying you have to go out and overdraft them like crazy, but they are guys that are probably going to end up on a lot of my teams. I typically have, well, I won't say the number, but way too many fantasy teams every year. They're probably going to end up on most of them because I'm getting them very, very late. I want to expand on Austin Eckler first. He is an older running back at this point. Didn't have a great 2023.
Nope.
However, contextually, if you look at his 2023, I think people are a little bit more spooked than they should be. Because if you're looking at what realistically happened, he got a high ankle sprain in week 1 of last year. His first high ankle sprain he's ever had in his life, by the way, which I found surprising. I was like, you're an NFL running back, you've never had an ankle sprain? But that was his first one. So, he's never had to rehab it from it before, and he said that was a very frustrating challenge because he's like, why won't my foot work, right? Gets back by week 6, gets a low ankle on the other ankle, so he's hobbled, and he's going against, I'm not kidding, 75% of the top run defenses in the NFL, like back to back to back to back to back when he gets back in there, right? He went against Baltimore, he went against New England, he went against the Jets, he went against the Lions, he went against Kansas City, like murderer's row of run defenses. And you're playing on 2 bad wheels.
Welcome back.
No shit, he had a bad 2023, right? I think he's still got juice. Obviously, he still catches the ball well. And he fits what Cliff does.
That's the most important piece to me is that, he's primed for what I would say positive regression. He came in much lower than expectations last year for many reasons. We just talked about those, but they're not necessarily the reasons that people think. People automatically jump to, well, he's close to 30, so it's going to happen all the time now. It might.
Guess he's dead.
Yeah.
It's like,
do something.
Guys.
No. And the fit is probably the most important thing because we talked about the preponderance of screens that Cliff likes to use, right? And Eckler is excellent at that. He's an extremely strong player, especially for his size. I would say almost equally valuable as a runner and a receiver. And a lot of backs, that's not true for in the NFL. They really do sort of specialize in one or the other. Can run inside, can run outside, is going to be a great safety net for a young quarterback out there after a nice little chip block to be like, hey, throw me the ball. I'm going to get you 4 yards. We're going to stay ahead of the sticks. That Eckler can do very well, fit with the offense. I'm sure he's got a chip. I'm sure he's got an absolute chip on his shoulder. He had the contract negotiation, and it was sort of long and drawn out with the Chargers. He ends up moving on organizations. He wants to show everybody, not just the Chargers, but everybody, like, I'm not done. Like, I take great care of my body. I'm still effective. I can still do this at a very high level. He's more experienced than any other back they have on their roster. There's really no reason that he's not going to get every chance to overproduce that ADP.
And then looking at Terry at wide receiver 32, I think a lot of people are thinking, okay, it's a rookie quarterback, it's a new system. I don't think people think that Terry is past his prime, but I do think that there's a lot of trepidation about what this offense is going to look like. I'm telling you guys, it's going to be the DeAndre Hopkins role. Like, he's going to be the isolated receiver on the backside of all those 3x1s that we talked about, because the entire point of the system is to get people into single high safety structures to then open up those one-on-one opportunities. The entire goal is to create one-on-one opportunities, whether it's, for slot fades to the field or for Terry running those go balls backside. Like, anytime you get into a too high structure so that we're playing a half field safety to either the field side or to the boundary side, that's when they hit you with all the inside zone variations, all the counter variations, everything like that, because they're trying to punish you with the run game. And it actually is a really fun, effective run game. They try to punish you with that to make you freak out and get back down into those single high safety looks so that they can then take those shots one-on-one. We saw DeAndre Hopkins do that when he was the X receiver there, which is, I am lining up boundary side, I am not moving ever, And when we get into a jam and they give me the one-on-one, I'm going to go win that one-on-one. And Hopkins repeatedly got them out of jams because he was always one-on-one. Terry is going to be that role. The entire offense is built around him being in that role. So wide receiver 32, little light for me because, by the way, what does Jaden Daniels throw really well? Yeah. Fades down the sideline. What does Terry run really well? Fades down the sideline. I don't know, man. I feel like this all kind of fits.
They're going to move him around a little bit. I know you said just lock him in and don't move him. They're going to move him around a little bit. Cliff, if we talked about learning those lessons, if we talked about adding in things that he didn't do as much, and when people see McLaurin motion from the outside to the slot,
yeah, all 3 times this season,
they should be terrified.
It's not going to happen often. It will happen sometimes, but it won't happen.
It's going to happen a little bit, and when it happens, defenses should be like, yo, 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 yo. We got one of the best slot fade throwers in the history of college football and a guy that can run that route. Like, everybody over here. Forget those guys. And that's the other thing is his competition, and I know you're going to take this as Jahan Dotson slander, and it is a little bit just because he hasn't achieved that plateau yet. Like, Terry's competition in the receiving core for targets right now is Jahan Dotson and a rookie Luke McCaffrey.
Oh, no, he's the guy.
He is so the guy.
Yeah.
I mean, more so in this receiving core than almost any other receiving core. Can you point to Terry McLaurin and go, no, that's like 80% of the targets right off the crack, right? They lost their most tenured tight end that took a bunch of those targets. Again, completely different staff, completely different offense. You look at what's left, it's like McLaurin and other guys. And in terms of volume, when you're talking about best ball and you just need production, you don't even need it necessarily every week, but you probably are going to get it every week because he's going to get the targets. McLaurin really stands out as like the singular guy. And Jaden Daniels can throw a lot of passes that he can run the routes for extremely well.
And bringing up Jaden himself, who again is at QB 13, it's not often that you see a quarterback with his rushing pedigree be valued this low.
Right.
I would say in the last 15 years or so, quarterbacks that can run like him tend to have their value go way, 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 way up, regardless of how good the passing offense is. Like you look at Justin Fields' fantasy value versus like actual real on-field football value.
Yeah.
And he paid it off because he was such a good runner and such a dynamic runner in Chicago.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like if you're taking all of the passing production that we expect between Jaden and Terry and, you know, whatever Jahan contributes, whatever Ben Sinnott contributes, even like a wild Zach Ertz sighting here and there.
For sure.
If you take all that and then add all of the rushing production that we also think Jaden can get, God willing he doesn't turn into pink mist when he runs into linebackers willingly, but as long as he stays healthy, like that's probably not QB 13. So even if he's, you know, QB 9, you're still getting him at a value relative to where I think he's going right now. I'm not saying you have to crazy overdraft him, but there is potential, since he's going as a QB2 right now, there is potential for him to vastly outperform that and be a pretty significant value.
Yeah, and this is not a team that's going to play with lead a lot.
I'd be surprised if they have them very often.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're going to be playing from behind, and that means throwing the football to try and catch up in the NFL. So you can say garbage time, you can say not competitive, whatever else. For the terms of this, for our underdog top 3, for fantasy football, for best ball, for production statistically, he's going to be throwing a lot. He's going to have a lot of chances to put it up there. And, yeah, when he breaks contain, he's not getting 5 yards. He might get 60 and a touchdown.
Yeah.
Like, he does that regularly. Clearly the best runner at the quarterback position coming out of college football in the last little while. Easily the top rusher that came out last year. And that's not Drake May slander. Drake May is very gifted as a runner. Jaden Daniels is a whole different class as a runner. And he is going to need that as a rookie quarterback when things break down. He is going to use that. He is going to be throwing, you know, from behind. All those things are going to create statistics. And I'm with you. His value probably slightly undervalued just because of the uncertainty, all of the uncertainty around the organization. In terms of the tools he brings, it's better than QB 13.
Yeah. So best values that you're going to get here are Terry because he's being valued as like a wide receiver 3, and Eckler because he's being valued as like a running back 4. But don't sleep on Jaden Daniels, folks. Like, again, he wasn't even in my top 2 quarterbacks in this class. Doesn't mean I didn't like him a lot. Like, I really do like this fit. I think it's going to work. So if you're a best ball player or a fantasy player in general, and you want to check out Underdog Fantasy, you can draft right now. Best ball summer's going on. There's millions and millions and millions of dollars in prizes all summer long. You can also do pick'ems for NBA or for hockey or for golf, depending on when you're watching this. I mean, pretty much any sport you can think of, they have pick'ems. They have season-long pick'ems if you want to do, season-long higher or lowers for NFL. Or if you just want to play during the NFL season, you can do pick'ems during the NFL season too. So you can check that out at the link in the description below or at the QR code on the screen. And if you use promo code BOOTLEG, you'll get a special pick in the lobby for pick'ems and up to $250 in bonus cash. So thank you once again to Underdog for making all of this possible, funding this entire series, and giving us a reason to talk about the Commanders for an hour.
I think it's great. It's a fun team. It's an exciting team. A lot of turnover. We're now turning the page to all the turnover that we talked about. So many folks that have moved on. When I do these agendas, there's a physical thing about how far down the page the turnover list goes as to just how many names are on it. Easily the biggest one I've done so far. I haven't written the entire series, but this is almost double most of the other entries.
There's just nobody left.
A lot of turnover in a very short period of time. So we're really going to talk about the significant ones. Doesn't mean all of them. We will list all of them on screen. Thank you, editors, for making the print very small so it fits. We appreciate that. But Charles Leno Jr., retired, left tackle for the Commanders for quite some time. Played 78% of their snaps, almost 80% of their snaps. Logan Thomas moved on as well. 65% of the snaps for him. Not even really going to touch on guys like Nick Gates, who played almost 60% of the snaps at center because they have a couple of good answers that we like there. One from free agency, one they drafted last year. Yeah, names and names and names and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. Lots of guys that we liked, lots of guys that, didn't pan out for one reason or another will still have careers around the league. You get down to Curtis Samuel. He went on to the Bills as a wide receiver 3. Cody Barton, the linebacker, is onto the Broncos. He was 70+% of the snaps. Kendall Fuller, a fixture in their secondary, a high draft pick for them, somebody that played really well, is now a Dolphin. He was 87, almost 88% of their snaps. Jacoby Brissett, probably going to be the presumptive starter in New England, at least for the first few games. Anthony Gibson, the running back. Again, they've refilled the running back position. They have a lot of them. Anthony Gibson is now a Patriot with Drake May as well. Cameron Curl, a very promising young safety who I think they just kind of prioritize in terms of, man, we're going to have to pay him, is now a Ram. Sam Howell goes on in a trade to the Seahawks to back up Geno. And Shadik Charles, the left tackle, on to the Titans to help reinforce their offensive line. Liked him coming out of LSU. But again, it's not even like a third of the names that we're highlighting. If we did that, we would be here for another 30 minutes. Lot of players that incoming regime sort of very quickly identified and said, nope, we're going to make a lot of changes here. We're going to sweep the decks clear of basically as many contracts as we can. This is a massive amount of movement for an NFL team. And again, that typically happens over the first year and a half of a GM's tenure. It happened within 3 months.
And I think that particular graphic is a good illustration of the state of where this roster was, because very few of those names are, they're going to miss him. There wasn't a whole lot of...
It was a handful.
Oh, God. That's rough that they're pretty much all of those. I'm like, I get it.
Sure.
I understand.
Yep.
But I think that's where the roster was, where they lost dozens of guys, and pretty much all of them I was like, yeah, cool. I'll see you later. There wasn't a lot of gut punches there.
There's 3 in there that you're like, it would be nice if they could have kept him. He's a talented guy. But again, no I can't believe they let blank go.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
In terms of who they did retain, it's a much shorter list.
Yeah, it's this long.
It's 4 guys: Cornelius Lucas, Jeremy Reeves, Efe Obada, Jamison Crowder. I would assume Cornelius Lucas is on track to be the starter at tackle for them, and we'll see how that goes. I know there's a pretty big debate amongst Commanders fandom about the left tackle position, because they didn't necessarily invest a premium. I mean, well, I guess you consider third round, like maybe that is a premium pick, but some people were thinking like, okay, they might come up into the back end of round 1 to give Jaden his left side pass protector. They might do it early in round 2, and they had other things in mind, and we do like the players they took, by the way.
Yep.
At the top of round 2. Actually, I think they had 3 second-round picks, if memory serves. But they didn't hit tackle until the 3rd round, and it's assumed that Cornelius Lucas is going to be the starter at left tackle, and maybe Brandon Coleman takes that job from him. So there's kind of a debate in Commanders fandom of like, are we playing with fire here?
That's a tough debate to have, especially as a fan of a team that used to employ Cornelius Lucas. You're like, oh, that's your presumptive left tackle. Okay. Neat. The bottom line is, when you're making this many moves and you have this many moves you need to make, these are not just moves for move's sake. Like, again, it's a really good indication of the state of where the roster was. You're not going to fix it all in 1 year, folks. Like, you're going to get some of the high picks right. You're going to get some of the high profile and expensive positions correct. You cannot possibly patch that many holes in 1 year. So the fact that you got, your quarterback, and we'll talk about the folks they brought in, to patch those holes in free agency and the draft, you're not going to get them all. This was a bottom 5 roster in the NFL. And so people like banging the table, but we didn't get a left tackle. If you did, you would have been banging the table and said, but we didn't get a quarterback or whatever else. There's just too much work to do for one cycle. They've done so much work here. We like it. It's positive direction. They're not done yet.
Unless, they get real lucky and Brandon Coleman is the left tackle, which,
it's possible.
God willing, right?
It's possible.
Maybe it works out. That would be a hell of a Hail Mary that they hit on, right? To get your quarterback, your young tight end, your left tackle, all like back to back to back. That would be great.
That would be great.
And we'll see if it happens. But a lot of Commanders fans are like,
well, and rightfully so. But again, that's the thing, is like, if you check off 4 or 5 needs sort of met and good moving forward, you're going to need that other cycle. It's fine. I know it's hard to have that kind of patience, but you live through all the terrible. It looks like at the start they're building this the right way. And yeah, if the Hail Mary at left tackle doesn't work out, which, it might not, chances say that it won't, you're probably going to still have picks next year. You didn't sell a whole bunch of picks this year to get what you got. You're going to keep building. You're going to have free agency money. You're going to continue to build the roster. You're still within your rookie quarterback's, contract window that's affordable. It's going to take a little bit, but because of the salary cap, because of the way roster movement works in the NFL, you cannot snap your fingers on an NFL team and fix, a team that's like 85% holes. Like, you can fix 50 of them if you do really well, but there's still going to be a couple.
Just got to hope that, you pull a Bears and you find a Braxton Jones in the 5th round. And
like I said, it is possible.
It's possible.
It's not Coleman slander. It's just like, because I'm well-versed in Coleman slander.
It's a maybe.
I hope so, but if it doesn't work out, hey, that's the percentages, and you've still got more swings. We're not done. It's not, oh, well, we tried and now our window's over. Like, no, you've got another 2 to 3 years to build the rest of this roster. And if it doesn't work out for Brandon Coleman, they're going to get a tackle a different way. Yes, they still need one. It's going to be an argument because it's an important position, but it's kind of like, we're arguing against the chances here. We're just hoping that it all really works out, crossing our fingers.
In terms of third-party additions, again, a very long list because it's like the tides back here behind us. What goes out must come back in.
Oh, you're getting good at this.
Learn from the best. Clelin Ferrell. Brought him in from the 49ers. Obviously familiar with Adam Peters, or rather Adam Peters is familiar with him. Brought in Michael Davis from the Chargers to be a big-bodied, potential press corner on the outside for them if they want to play a bunch of man. But looking at what Michael Davis did last year, not sure I would advise that either. So we'll see.
Speaking of low percentage gambles, they hope work out.
We'll see. Austin Eckler, talked at length about him. I think there's still a little something there for his age 29 season. Nick Allegretti, really like that pickup from the Chiefs. You paid him a decent amount of money, a little over $5 million. I think he's going to be their starting left guard. Dorrance Armstrong, mentioned him. They brought him in, as well as Dante Fowler. Noah Igbenogany sighting. Wild Igbenogany sighting here.
Yes, indeed.
Brought him also over from the Cowboys. Tyler Biadasz brought him from the Cowboys. So, again, a bunch of players Dan Quinn really likes and is familiar with. Presumably, Biadasz is going to be their starting center. And then I don't know what's going to happen with Ricky Stromberg. Like, maybe he's just going to keep being the swing everything.
Yeah.
If somebody goes down, he could play center. I think he could also play guard too.
Yep.
They'll figure that out. But, the fact that you got a Ricky Stromberg in your back pocket, that's a pretty strong interior line situation for them there. Marcus Mariota they brought in to be a backup to Jaden Daniels. Frankie Louvu, favorite of the show. Absolutely love Frankie Louvu. Paid him a pretty good chunk of money, over $10 million a year. Jeremy Chin also brought him in to be like a safety linebacker. Yes. All of it. Bobby Wagner, the ageless Bobby Wagner. Not a whole lot of big rough and tumble linebackers left in the league that can actually stack on guards and beat the crap out of people and stop the run. That was, as we mentioned, a huge problem for them last year. Their linebackers just couldn't get off blocks. Bobby Wagner can get off blocks. So, big pickup for them. It's just a lot of names here, man. A lot of names. A lot of names that I really like. Like, it wasn't a whole lot of, high dollar commitments, relative to the rest of the market. Mm-hmm. But it felt like safe, secure, not conservative, but smart spending.
That's the word I really keyed in on when I look at this list, is smart spending. Like, they did pay high dollars to a few guys. Frankie Louvu was one of them. They were going to have to pay.
But Frankie Louvu is also really freaking good.
Right.
So.
He's one of the top available players, and you get this kind of odd couple linebacker, on paper combo, duo, and you look at it and you go, that actually really kind of works. Mm-hmm. Like, that works great. They're both, like Bobby Wagner, you said ageless. He has really continued to play at a high level. Yes, the sort of very edges of the outside range have fallen off, but within that cone, between the numbers, he's still crazy effective, mm-hmm. and that's against the pass and the run. Louvu is a terror all over the field, a real versatile chess piece for them. I love the combination. And again, they don't spend a ton on the two of them, and they get, in aggregate, a much better linebacking core on paper than they had last year. So just felt like that up and down the board. Tyler Biadasz going to be a stabilizing influence for Jaden Daniels as an extremely veteran center, knows the system, is familiar with the head coach, can kind of say, hey, this is what he's looking for here. Those are really valuable additions. So, and again, we talk about this with all teams. Did they do the thing to fix the thing that was really the worst? Well, Washington had a lot of things that were really bad, but most of these moves you can point to saying, yes, that stabilizes this thing. That thing, moves the needle towards better on something they really needed to fix, not just like, well, this guy was available and we want to win the offseason, and so he's a high-priced guy that's going to sell tickets. There wasn't a lot of that. It was like, nope, this guy maps to this. This guy maps to this. Cool, we can say we got better here. We got better here. We moved the needle. Are we done? No, but like, we're better here, better here, better here, and we spent reasonably to do that. That's a really smart approach.
Yeah, it's empty calories versus
Correct.
Like a good hearty PB&J in the middle of a long hike. Like what's actually going to help you finish?
That's right.
Probably the PB&J.
Indeed.
Can't just suck down a bunch of Jolly Ranchers and expect to make it to the end. So.
Tell my kids.
That's true. Although I will say 11-year-olds they have boundless energy. They'll probably finish the hike anyway.
Built different.
All right, let's get to the draft. We mentioned a few of these names. We've talked about a few of them at length, but let's look at the class holistically. And I do want to note, a lot of people that didn't like what the Commanders did in the draft. We are not some of those people. We really like what the Commanders did. I was actually surprised that the reaction to their draft was as negative as it was.
Yeah.
But again, even though I had Jaden Daniels as my QB3 instead of QB2, if we're just looking at fits, like, okay, sure, I get it.
Hard to argue.
Yeah.
And hard to argue with the results in aggregate as this draft went on. If you were watching our draft live stream, we were like, Adam Peters cooking a little something here. We're gonna have to see if he tails off in the back. He didn't. He did strong work all the way through the draft. Jaden Daniels, QB out of LSU, dual threat in every sense of the word at pick 2 overall. Look, they needed new direction at quarterback. They had a high pick. It lined up with a very good quarterback class. Again, doesn't mean Jaden Daniels is going to be a success. It means it's a very smart shot, again, with fit and who they were going to bring in terms of staff. And it gives everybody there the best possible chance. Again, does that mean it's a lock? It doesn't. I think Jaden Daniels is an extremely talented quarterback. I had him as my QB2. We'll see, but he needs some more weapons. He needs a little bit more protection, but that doesn't mean he's not going to provide a bunch of moments in his first season that will probably tell us whether or not he's got it going forward. Johnny Newton, defensive tackle from Illinois.
This one hurts.
A little bit. So round 2, pick 36. Did not think he would last that long. Turns out the reason is the one we don't get to see, medicals. So we knew he had a foot. Everybody was, he got 2 feet, but
and they're both hurt. Yeah.
Injury to a foot that we knew about. And then turns out since the draft, he's had work done on the other foot, which is why teams probably knew about that from the combine. Why a player of his caliber slipped as far as he did, because his on-field tape says much better than round 2, pick 36. But people are worried about the medicals. If that clears up, and we sure hope it does, because he is a tremendously fun player and he will be an asset to the pass rush. I don't really care whether it's interior or exterior. A lot of teams will tell you that interior pass rush is what they want. It's a quicker line to the quarterback. It's more disruptive. He can provide that and a lot of other things. Statistically, was easily the most productive DT in this entire class. Great player. Hope he gets healthy and stays that way. If he does, Adam Peters will look really smart. If he doesn't, as always, people say it was a wasted pick. So we'll see how that goes. Mike Sanderstill, we talked about him, the cornerback out of Michigan, national champion Wolverine, round 2, pick 50, converted wide receiver, extremely smart. The fact that he's had as much success at a position as difficult as nickel as quickly as he has. He's only played the position for like a year and a half.
It's not just, he's a new DB. He's a new DB, and he played nickel, the hardest DB spot to play, arguably the hardest defensive spot to play, period.
Yeah.
And he did it at an extremely high level, was arguably the best nickel in college football, with 2 years of experience at the position. By the way, his nickname at Michigan was the CEO.
Yep.
So it gives you an idea of what he was like in the room. Rare dude, man. Yeah. Rare player.
He's going to hinge a lot of their defensive efforts. The ability to lean on him as hard as they're going to as early as they are in his career are going to let them move other pieces around in that secondary. That's going to be key for them. And that's rare to say for a rookie. It's even more rare to say for a rookie nickel. Because, again, transition from college to pros, I don't care who you are or what you won, is very difficult. If I have faith in a player making that transition smoothly, like Mike Sanderstill is near the top of that list in this draft. I think he was the second best nickel in this draft, and his ceiling is probably the highest because, again, he just got started and he's already this good. Ben Sinnott, the tight end from Kansas State, round 2, 3 picks later at pick 53. Player we both really like. Reminds me of a young Jay Novacek. I know that's a way back reference.
What a pull.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And he is a very good player in, I would say, all 3 phases of being a tight end. You know, run blocking, pass catching, route running, and just being really smart about what he has to do in the offense, and then making things happen after the catch. Not the most dynamic athlete in terms of just crazy measurables, but like what he accomplishes on the field after he catches the football is pretty impressive. I think he's going to play more minutes sooner rather than later, even with Zach Ertz in the fold. Like, he's going to learn his lessons from Zach Ertz, and then he's going to take over. I would say by the late third of the season, Ben Sinnott's probably going to be getting primary reps because he's going to be paying them off.
And I think if you're looking at, system fit and what we talked about earlier with how much 12 personnel they run, how much counter they run, all the variations of inside zone that they run when they use their tight ends as, basically fullbacks on a lot of those when you're doing like insert or like, split zone, all that kind of stuff. That's what Ben Sinnott does. And he's one of the best, if not the best, blocking tight end at that particular type of run scheme, right?
On the
like,
move.
Get him in space, find a safety, and just delete him from the face of the earth. Like, yeah, that's exactly why they took him, because he's going to be a menace for blocking on screens in space.
Yep.
He's going to be a menace on counter. He can do all the sift block stuff. You want to do some quarterback runs and have him be like blocking for Jaden out in space. He could do that. Probably going to be great on kickoff return team as a blocker in space there. Could even give him, some reverses on kickoff returns because of the new kickoff structure. Like, wouldn't be surprised if a bunch of teams try that, like the XFL did. Give him some jet sweeps, like whatever, man. He's going to be great. He's going to be really, really good. I think there's a bunch of teams that you could have put Ben Sinnott on and he wouldn't have achieved his potential.
Sure.
Just because of how those offenses are structured. This is one of the offenses where I'm like, oh yeah, no, that's going to work.
They picked him for a reason, and he's going to run through some mother's faces.
Yes.
After he catches football. Like, we're talking about all his blocking prowess. Like, he's a good receiver, and again, his yak comes from I'm bigger and stronger than you because you're a defensive back, and I'm going to run you the hell over. He's going to do that too. Washington fans are going to love him as a player. Luke McCaffrey, the wide receiver out of Rice, pick 100 overall in the third round. A lot of people were talking about how that was a tremendous value and how they stole him. I thought it was appropriate value. He's a talented player. Again, can see the role very easily for what he's going to be. He's going to be that third or fourth wide receiver, plays inside, gets himself open, really good route runner, strong hands, has a path to playing time there. Might not be the widest slice of the pie with all these other targets to feed, but I get it. Brandon Coleman, the offensive tackle out of TCU, again, in the third round, pick 67, so he actually was before McCaffrey, had that out of order. Hopefully, he works out as one of the bookends for Washington. And then Dominique Hampton, one of our favorites, safety out of Washington, down to round 5, pick 161. Incredibly smart player who I could see playing the deep third fairly quickly because his mental reps, he had a lot of experience, 6 years at Washington. He's a very smart player. I think he was underrated. They grabbed him late. If Derek Forrest has any struggles in that sort of single high role early, like, I wouldn't be surprised for them to slot in Dom Hampton because, again, more experienced than your average rookie, and I think he can sort of take that load. He's seen a lot of formations, of football, of everything else, and I think that's going to help him play more quickly, even if it's not as a starter.
See, that's interesting because I saw it slightly differently, right? Because I was looking at, okay, you bring in Jeremy Chin, you draft Dom Hampton.
Yep.
There's UDFA, built similarly, Tyler Owens that they brought in. I was like, so they have 3 220-ish pound hybrid safety linebackers. Yeah. Is Dan Quinn going to develop a package where he puts all of them on the field at the same time and says, go ahead, guess what we're doing? Yeah, Bet like, you can't.
Heavy dime? Yeah, he is.
It's like, how many of one body type do you need on one defense?
Yeah, and Owens especially, you'll talk about him in the UDFA section, but that dude can run.
Oh, he's extremely gifted. I think medicals is the reason why he fell. I mean, he did pop a groin at combine, but I wouldn't be surprised.
I love how we say that so casually. Oh, yeah. Ruined a major muscle group.
He was going to roll,
interview.
Though, man. Yeah. Like, if he didn't pull up at combine, he was going to roll.
Good size, great length, and, man, he can fly.
That probably is a good segue to our UDFA section, by the way. Had some really interesting UDFAs that they brought in. Sam Hartman to be, maybe battling for the QB3 job. Maybe he's a camp arm. We'll see. But, again, notable name. A lot of people really like Sam Hartman as kind of a late day 3 quarterback flyer type. Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, the wide receiver out of Georgia. I definitely thought he was going to get drafted. Very surprised that he wasn't drafted. Yep. There might be a job available for him in this wide receiver core as like a wide receiver 5, so we'll see if he can make it. Chigozie Anuzium, really liked him a lot. Big body, long, very fluid for how long he is. You're not typically used to seeing guys that are his size have hips like he does.
Plays a ton of press.
Like I could see him being almost kind of like the AJ Boye role when Boye was still in Houston as their 4th corner. And back then, Boye's only job was there's the tight end on 3rd down, go take away the tight end on 3rd down. Like Boye, before he became AJ Boye, was that era of Texans' answer to Travis Kelce.
Right.
Like they would put him in man on Kelce and be like, you handle him.
Go smother.
Because you're a corner and you're physical and everything like that. Go handle Travis Kelce. We'll handle the rest. And there are some teams that their 4th corner is kind of really just their tight end guy. I feel like Anuzium at the next level is going to be the tight end guy because of how he's built, how good his hips are. AJ Woods also brought in from Pitt, and Tyler Owens, like we mentioned, brought in from Texas Tech, who is a lot bigger than most modern safeties and is roughly the same size as a lot of modern linebackers. Could see a position switch for him there.
Yeah, Quinn's done it before too, so he has experience with that particular position swap. Woods, just want to give him a shout out as an absolute dog. Like he, pick corners. We love our slightly undersized pick corners.
They only come one way, and that's angry.
And he is continuing the tradition. He has not dropped the mantle on that one. So some fun players that they added, quote unquote, for free. Rosemy-Jacksaint, he's a really interesting receiver. And when I got to him, I got to his full study late, and I was like, damn, he's slow. He's really slow. I was like, wait a minute, how is he so productive? How did he get so many catches? So it caused me to kind of go back to his tape again and go, damn, in the SEC, this guy's not fast. Good size, great hands, pretty good routes, but he always caught balls in coverage. And I was like, and sure enough, I went back. I was like, did he test crazy fast? Because again, you see that sort of disparity between what a guy ran and what he showed up on tape. I was like, nope, he ran pretty slow too. He's a big, strong, physical receiver. He knows how he's going to win, and he wins even at the highest level of competition.
If you're going to win at that speed, you better be really good at the catch point, and he's really good at the catch point.
Honestly, this sounds weird for saying guy has limitations physically, but I came away even more impressed that he was that productive at that speed. And I was like, man, he knows how to get it done. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't put him past him to earn a role at the next level.
Brings us to our summary section, where we distilled all this down to basically one rating: thumbs up, thumbs down, or thumbs even. Are they better than they were last year? Have to go thumbs up, like unequivocally. Have to go thumbs up, no debate.
For so many reasons, right?
For so many reasons, and there's some teams where you're kind of waffling between.
Yeah, should
is it thumbs even? Like, did they actually get better? Like, no, this team got a lot better in pretty short order.
Yeah, and we're talking front office, ownership. Can't miss that.
It starts there.
Yeah. Ownership, front office, in terms of the ideal, I think, of what they want to be. If you talk about identity and how important that is to a football team, and really, again, top to bottom, what's your identity? You've got to identify players that fit it. You got to draft for it. You got to develop for it. You got to use that in your free agency strategy. If you don't have that, or you're not really sure about it, or you're kind of waffling, which Washington has been doing for years. Like if I said, what was the identity of the 2023 Commanders? What was the identity of the 20?
Getting the shit kicked out of them?
Yeah, and it's not great. I don't think there's a strong... It didn't even feel like at sort of preseason press conferences they had a strong idea at the podium about, besides coach speak, we're going to, be tough, physical, and fast and a smart football team. Like, okay, great. It feels like this team already, even though they haven't played a game yet under this new regime, top to bottom, has a stronger sense of identity about what they want to get done. And they're still going to develop that. There's a lot yet to be determined. But in terms of having that sort of unified vision, like, so much better than where they've been.
And that brings us to ceiling and floor, right? We've said a lot of positive things. We think they're trending in the right direction. Doesn't necessarily mean we think they're going to go to the playoffs, but it does mean they're not going to be like picking second overall again.
Yeah.
So, again, going in the right direction, but job's not done. So, when looking at ceiling and floor in wins, I actually have a pretty wide range. I think it's going to be better than it was last year, but I have a very wide range of potential outcomes based on how quickly all these new additions gel together. Floor of 4 wins, which is essentially what it was last year. But again, I think the bottom was last year, right?
Yep.
Ceiling of 9 wins. So they could potentially be tickling the conversation of 7th seed if everything, and I mean everything, goes well. There's still some major holes to fill.
Yeah.
There's still a lot riding on some pretty key young pieces at quarterback and potentially even at left tackle. You got a rookie quarterback, rookie left tackle. Like, things can go wrong pretty quick. But if everything goes right, this could be an above 500 team in year one that's at least in the playoff conversation late in the year. You know, they're not getting flexed out of games.
Yeah.
They're probably entertaining to watch. And then you come back in 2025 with another full off season of Adam Peters, you know, cooking and having another good draft. And that's when the discussion of like, okay, now it's a playoff team.
Sure.
So I think 2024 is establish the foothold. 2025 is when they really get after it. I think that they're well on their way.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that assessment of timeline in terms of this year being an establishment year of so many things. And because there are that many moving pieces and they have holes at some key positions, I'm a little less bullish. I'm going to say 8 is if everything goes right and Jaden Daniels has a hot start. I think 8 wins for this team would be a large accomplishment.
It would be huge.
In a positive direction. My floor is the same, though. I don't think they go below 4 because, yes, I believe last year was the floor, and we've already said they've made so many positive changes in all areas of this sort of operation that it's difficult for me to think of them winning less than that. And look, Jaden Daniels is going to take him on his back a couple of times, you know. Late in the game, it's going to be close, and he's going to break a long run for a touchdown, or he's going to whip one, 70 yards down the field on a dot. It's going to happen a couple of times. Is that going to be enough to power them towards like really, strong playoff contention towards the end of the year? I don't think so. I think they'll be one of the teams that falls out a little bit earlier, but that can still be a very positive season in the right direction and a win overall for the organization, and say, hey, if we stack another offseason like the last one, yeah, then our window for being a playoff team and being consistent in that approach is open.
Yeah, it kind of feels like Detroit, where it's, okay, we got to tear it down to the studs.
Right.
But
we have a lot of work
to do, but we have one good off season. Okay, we see it coming together. We have another good off season. All right, we're making strides.
Right.
Then you have a third good off season, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, we're in the NFC Championship game. How about that? It's kind of funny how it can take a while to happen, where like you see the moves being made, but you don't see the results, and then everything kind of happens all at once, where it's like, oh, all these moves kind of added up to
and then people
successful.
Say overnight success, and you're like, overnight took 3 years, but yes,
sure, yeah. So I kind of think that's the path they're on, where even if the results are slightly underwhelming in year one, like if you just watch them, you're going to see a difference, and you just kind of have to have faith in the process, and then you're going to look up in 3 years and be like, oh, they won the division. That's cool.
I think that's the summary of sort of the 2024 Commanders is they're on the right path now. And you couldn't say that before. Watch what they do. They're going to be entertaining to watch, Commanders fans, this year, like in a way that last year's teams weren't. Just trust me, offense and defense. You might not get the end result you want. They might not win the game, but they're going to be easier to watch on both sides of the ball.
And isn't that what Commanders fans want most? They just want to be watchable.
I don't know about most, but like they'll take it as a first step.
Just don't ruin our Sundays. That's all we ask for.
As often.
Yeah, as often as you can. All right, well, if you guys enjoyed this, it was a pleasantly positive Commanders episode for once.
Uplifting Commanders episode. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, it's been a while since we've had one of those. But fun team to talk about. Lots of change. If you guys like this, and if we, sufficiently hyped you up about the 2024 Washington Commanders, you can go to Homage, our clothing partner, where they have an NFL license. They have a whole bunch of different Commanders gear, combined with like Tecmo Bowl and a whole bunch of other random licenses that Homage has
Quick
collected.
soapbox, Commanders. Next year, new logo. Come on.
You know, the W,
do
it's
some-
slightly growing on me.
Oh,
not
do
gonna
some
lie.
work here. Like, we like the direction of the team. You've turned it around. You need to turn one more thing around.
I don't hate it. It's not like an elite top tier logo in the NFL, but it's grown on me. I'll give him that.
Okay, make it better, Commanders. Just
And the
make
color
it better.
scheme is awesome.
Oh,
it's always been awesome.
Classic, but make it better, Commanders. Don't listen to him.
Well, he's much grumpier than I am. It's the
True.
Gen Xer over here. We'll see you guys tomorrow for, I think it's the Giants,
Sounds about right.
who we were very positive about last year, and that didn't go well. And we have a lot of potentially not so nice things to say about them tomorrow, and their approach to everything. So, Commanders fans might want to tune in for that one. But we'll see you guys tomorrow to talk Giants, and then it's Eagles the day after that, I think. I don't know. Rest of the NFC East is coming this week. So tune in for that, and we will see you guys tomorrow.